the 25th Division advance at the edge of the Balati Pass in northern Luzon. 12th of April 1945, they pass a dead Japanese soldier, fallen across a bomb-splintered tree.
Filipino nurse tending to the wounded soldiers in a makeshift hospital located in Sens Cathedral during the campaign to retake the Philippines. 1942, Japanese soldiers celebrate after capturing an American gun emplacement in the Bataan province of the Philippines. 18th of January 1942, one of the first pictures of the Japanese invasion as they press forward on the Pacific shore.
Cabanatuan, Philippines, December 25. Secretly made photo of American and Filipino prisoners celebrating Christmas in the Cabanatuan POW camp. American and Philippine troops hold up their hands in surrender, as they are rounded up by the Japanese in Bataan, the Philippine Islands.
U.S. General Douglas MacArthur pinning Distinguished Service Cross on Captain Jesús A. Villamor of the Philippine Air Force for heroism in the air, Manila, Philippines, Office of War Information, December 22, 1941.
American soldiers of 6th Ranger Battalion and Filipino guerrillas returning from a mission during which they freed Allied POWs, many of whom were survivors of the Bata and Death March, from a Japanese prison camp at Cabanatuan.
Hospital at Santo Tomas. View of American civilians and former internees as they lie in hospital beds in Santo Tomas University, which had been used as a civilian internment camp during the city's occupation by the Japanese military. Manila, Philippines, February 1945. American and Filipino civilians, as well as those of many other nationalities, had been held there for 3 years prior to their liberation at the hands of U.S. troops in 1945. First American flag raised on late in the Philippines, raised HR plus 22 minutes. The safe sector. 20th of March 1945, American soldiers watching as refugees pick their way through the debris of North Manila after safely arriving in the American-held part of the city while fighting continues elsewhere. Picture dated October 1944 showing American soldiers landing on the central Philippine island of Leyte during the battle against Japanese troops. American soldiers have severely depleted the Japanese fleet and successfully landed on the beach under the command of General Douglas MacArthur. Smoking out. February 1945, Private First Class Lyle O. Slatt, the right member of the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment, scouts out an area next to a cloud of burning gasoline used to force Japanese soldiers out of hiding. World War II, Corregidor Island, Philippines.
Foxhole, 7th of April 1942, American and Filipino soldiers in a foxhole during the battle for the Bataan Peninsula and the Pacific Campaign of World War II.
Liberated American prisoners of war. 1945 Manila, Philippines, thinned to the point of emaciation by the niggardly rations given them of the Japs, and by long sieges of illness. Liberated U.S. prisoners of war line up inside the forbidding walls of Bilibid prison in Manila to pose for Navy photographers of Feb. 8, 1945. The protruding ribs and collarbones, the slender arms and legs of these men, testify to the care given them by the Japs during their 3-year imprisonment in Bilibid. Corregidor Paratroopers. 16th of February 1945, American paratroops of the 503rd Regiment Parachute Regiment drop on the bomb-shattered terrain of the island of Corregidor in the Philippines. The air warriors quickly seized batteries and defenses, clearing the entrance to Manila Bay and opening the harbor to the Allied fleet. Filipino civilians flee combat zone. While American troops watch, Filipino civilians carry the belongings as they flee areas of fighting. Philippines, 1945. American soldiers Samuel Stenzler, Frank Spear, and James MacD. Gallagher, with hands tied behind the backs, with others during the death march from Bataan to prison camp Cabanatuan while undergoing torture, starvation, and death by the hundreds. 23rd of March 1945, a Filipino woman wounded in the face by shrapnel waits in front of her burnt home in Manila for someone to take her to safety across the Pasig River. An accusing finger. 27th of March 1945, J.E. Hoover, a leader of Filipinos during the Japanese occupation, points an accusing finger at a Chinese Filipino, charged with being a spy for the Japanese. Philippine Islands victory stamps on envelope 1945. The Battle of Manila from 3rd of February to 3rd of March 1945, fought by American, Filipino and Japanese forces, was part of the Philippines' 1945 campaign. The battle was terrible and Manila was devastated. These stamps commemorate the victory and the envelope is dated 18th of March 1945.